Hey, everybody, it is Trags, Mike Petralia, back with the latest episode of the Code Reds podcast on the CLNS Media Network. My pleasure to welcome back Tommy Thrall, the play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Reds on the Reds Radio Network. He was in Pittsburgh as the Reds dropped a heartbreaker on Wednesday, 1-0 to the Pittsburgh Pirates. They finished up the road trip through Milwaukee and Pittsburgh 2-4. Tommy, I'll start with this. First of all, I thought Hunter Greene was as good as he has looked all season long. One of his best performances in a Reds uniform.
It's getting to a point now where it's kind of hard to differentiate because he's had so many good ones now. But yeah, I mean, it was just as good as any of them we've seen. I think there have maybe been a couple where he just might have been a little bit more pitch efficient, a little bit more dominant. But I mean, we're splitting hairs. He was just as good as he's been when he's been at his best. It's been really fun to watch that transformation of him going from a guy that was really a thrower, and maybe that doesn't seem fair, but that's what it looked like, at least, to a guy that's now pitching. And it might not necessarily be that. It appears to be that, but he's got so much more control over everything. I think the split finger helps him out a lot. We've really seen an increase in usage of that over the last 4 starts, 5 starts, whatever it's been. And that's been a big difference maker for him. So that is, it's really been fun to watch that. I mean, there were people early in the season that thought, well, he might be a guy that might need to be sent out for a little bit and see if he can kind of get things on track down in the minor leagues. And that seems like such a far-fetched thought at this point, where that it's so ludicrous it doesn't even bear mentioning. But that was where he was at, and now he's the best pitcher on this staff.
You know, that's saying something, because that's one thing I want to focus on at the top of this podcast is the Reds now legitimately have a 1-2 combo. One of the best 1-2 combos, if you ask me, in the National League, and one of the best in baseball in Hunter Greene and his development, and certainly Nick Lodolo. He is as reliable and maybe the most reliable pitcher in the rotation and on the staff right now. To have those two guys at the top of the rotation, once the offense eventually comes around, and I think it will, that gives the Reds really what they need going down the stretch of the season.
Yeah, we'll talk about the offense in a little bit, and I'm right there with you. I think the offense is going to come around eventually. They're just going through another tough stretch. I mean, let's face it, they still don't have all their pieces. But what can carry you and keep you in games during a stretch like this is good starting pitching. The combination of Lodolo and Hunter Greene, look, everybody envisions this team being a postseason team at some point, and hopefully, if not this year, in the very near future. Those two guys can carry you a long way in a postseason series. You look at teams that have success in the playoffs, they always have a 1-2 punch at the top of the rotation. The fact that the Reds have that, that's a very enviable position for them to be in. I think you're spot on. Even when Lodolo doesn't have his best, he's proven now he can be one of the most dominant pitchers in the game, because he still can give you 6, sometimes 7 innings when he doesn't have his best stuff.
Right.
That is so rare for somebody, I think, as young as him. But that's where he's at. Hunter Greene, it's almost automatic that you're going to get at least 6 innings out of him now. And think about how crazy that thought would have been probably 2 months ago, maybe not even that long ago. But that's the progress that he's made. And if you're going to have success in the postseason, you got to have a couple of anchors at the top of your rotation. I'm still not convinced that Frankie Montas can't be a guy that can kind of bolster this pitching staff as well. I think eventually he'll find some consistency. Andrew Abbott's done a tremendous job. Eventually Graham Ashcraft's going to be back. I still have full faith in him, full confidence that he'll be back. He might make another start or two in AAA. I know there were some things that they wanted him to work on. He got it straightened out last year. I'm confident that he'll get it turned around again this year. It's going to get to a point, I firmly believe, that the Reds will have one of the best pitching rotations, certainly in the division, and one of the best in baseball. But it's all got to come together, but it all seems to be trending in that right direction, and the bullpen's been pretty good too.
So in this age, Tommy Thrall, of instant gratification, I think a lot of people expected Nick Lodolo and Hunter Greene to be this right out of the box in 2022. And that, I mean, certainly they both had great stuff and they had great arms, but it takes a while. What the last 2 years demonstrates is that it takes a while for pitchers to hone their craft at the major league level. And neither one of these pitchers really had significant time in the minors.
No, this isn't the NBA. It's not the NFL where you get drafted, all of a sudden you get to the highest level and you're
Right.
contributing right away. It happens for some guys, but very, very, very few guys does that actually happen with. Some of the best players in the game have had to get sent out and then brought back up. Before we started recording, Mike Trout, we were talking about him.
Yeah.
If I remember correctly, at one point early on in his career, he got to the big leagues and then the Angels sent him back out. It happens to a lot of really good players. Now, you don't necessarily have to get sent out to kind of turn that corner, but everybody goes through the stretch where they adjust to the big leagues because the big leagues are adjusting to them. I think we've seen that to some extent with Spencer Steer this year. It doesn't just happen to pitchers. It happens to hitters too. We were seeing that with Christian Encarnacion Strand before he got hurt. I still have faith at some point he'll get that figured out. So it's just part of it. That's why I think this year was so important. Last year, all these guys got to the big leagues. They had so much success. And in just about every interview I did going into this season, I would tell people, hey, look, there is every reason in the world to have confidence and be excited about this team. But at the same time, we have to keep in mind there will be growing pains. And I think we're seeing some of those at times, but we're also seeing what happens when you come out of those growing pains with guys like Nick Lodolo and Hunter Greene, because now that they're hitting their stride. And I think we're going to see that with other guys on this roster, not just pitchers, but hitters too, as they continue to get better and get used to the big leagues and learning how to make those adjustments and how to be a consistent big league player.
One thing that Hunter Greene mentioned early on in the season as he was forming a relationship and a bond with Frankie Montas was how Frankie was helping him watch games. After the game yesterday in Pittsburgh, Wednesday in Pittsburgh, it was interesting to me, notable to me, that Hunter Greene said he spent a lot of time on the bench watching the game, watching batters and how they approach the game, even his own batters approach Mitch Keller of the Pirates. And to me, what that signified is that Hunter Greene has really matured into a guy that really wants to pay attention to all facets of the game and implement those adjustments perhaps in his own game in real time. I don't think he had the ability to do that in his first couple of years or wasn't as comfortable doing that. Now I think he has learned that ability and we're really seeing the results of that maturity.
I think there's a few things there. We hear the term a lot, slow the game down. All right. So when you get to the big leagues, everything's moving so fast. You're just trying to keep your head above water, right?
Right.
And so I think picking up on, and that's a nuance thing, like that when you're watching hitters, when you're talking about sequencing, when you're sitting there talking with other pitchers about how to attack guys, to me, that's the nuance of the game. And it's a lot more in depth than just the big picture. I got to feel like as a big league player, having never been through it before, obviously, but I've got to imagine that your head is spinning so fast that all of that stuff that you're just talking about and what Hunter's talked about working with Frankie, there's no chance you could process all that when your mind is going a million miles an hour. Your first couple of years in the big leagues, things slow down as you get used to it, and it's kind of you add a little bit here, and you figure out little things, and then all of a sudden it all kind of comes together. And I think that's kind of where we're at. I think Hunter's able to slow things down a little bit, and I think he's at a point now where he can process that stuff. It's just not that easy, when you get to the big leagues, because there's so much information, there's so much to try to. It can be overwhelming. So as you get used to it, as you kind of adapt to that environment, I think it gets a little easier to pick up on those things and have those conversations, especially when you have a guy like Frankie that can articulate that so well, the things that he's seeing, the things to look for. Frankie's really sharp. He knows a lot about pitching. And I think that's one of his big benefits to this team is he he doesn't just want to be a great pitcher, but he wants to help everybody else be the best that they can. So he's a big addition, not just for what he's capable of on the mound, and we've seen glimpses of it, but for what he can do for some of these young pitchers, I think that's huge.
Yesterday, Hunter Greene had 9 strikeouts, not a single walk. And to me, that's the most impressive part of his stat line. Yes, he hit 2 batters early in the game. I get that, trying to make them uncomfortable, but he didn't walk a single batter. And that's a big deal. What I'm sure both of us recall, his very first ever start in Pittsburgh was 7 1/3, no hit innings, 9 strikeouts, just like Wednesday, but he walked 5 batters in that game. That's why I think on Wednesday, that was an even more impressive game and had exhibited more control and command, is the word I'm looking for, than even in that performance back in 2022.
Always better to hit guys than it is to walk them. Takes way fewer pitches. So that's
Good point, Tommy. Good point.
No, you never want to put guys on. And I thought one of the things that kind of stood out was one of the batters he hit was with the back foot curveball,
Yes.
or slider, I think it was. It's Lodolo's curveball, Hunter's slider, but it was a really nice pitch. I mean, I think it was a 2-strike pitch, if memory serves. Just got away from him a little bit, probably got a little bit too big, but that's good because that pitch has gotten a lot better. The control of everything has improved immensely. It's not just the fastball command, although his fastball command, there are times where we have seen him dot the outside corner with 100. I mean, he has improved his fastball command, and I don't know if it's so much as he's improved his command, or if it's more he's got more confidence in being able to command that pitch. But that's been a huge step forward for him. The walks, a lot of times those at bats tend to get long. I joke about it's better to hit somebody than walk somebody because it takes fewer pitches. But there is some truth to that because a lot of times those walks, can be the product of a long at bat, and those are what have plagued him. That's what drives up his pitch count. And sometimes they're a product of it. Almost, I don't know if this is the case, but it almost appears as though he might be chasing strikeouts at times. He doesn't seem to be doing that anymore either. He's much more on the attack, and it seems like a tough thing for pitchers to learn. But a lot of times when you're on the attack, you're throwing strike one, and you're not necessarily hunting for strikeouts, but you're going to get more because you're throwing more strikes. And you've got the hitters on their heels. The hitters are more defensive. So it's kind of one of those weird things. And hitters will tell you similar things about hitting too. If you try almost for the opposite, you'll get the result that you're looking for. It was funny. I remember a conversation I had with Emilio Pagan back in spring training. He'd gotten to a point where he was giving up fewer home runs. And I was asking him, well, what have you done to try to mitigate the long ball? And he goes, well, I've stopped trying to avoid giving up home runs. And it all kind of plays into that same thing.
Right.
You just relax a little bit. You try to do what you're supposed to do. It's kind of like the old process answer. You focus more on that than the end result, and then you'll get what you're looking for.
All right, let's move on to the subject that certainly a lot of Reds fans don't want to be reminded of, and the Reds themselves probably don't want to be reminded of. They scored 3 runs in 3 games in Pittsburgh. Their only offense the last 2 games was a home run off the bat of Santiago Espinal. That I love the bat flip and it clearing the fence by maybe half a foot, maybe. But that was their only offense, Tommy, in the last 18 innings in Pittsburgh. And it's frustrating when you're getting very good pitching and and they won the game, obviously 2-1. They held on to win that game. But when you're talking about a division game, you want to win those series. And the Reds, in this road trip, they lost both of those series. The offense tends to disappear. And I guess where I'm leading now is Noelvi Marte.
Mm-hmm.
He is a bat that they're going to get back. But if you think you're getting Noelvi Marte from September 2023 back, maybe not so fast, because in the first 7 games, with AAA Louisville on his rehab off his PED suspension. He is hitting 226. He's got 7 hits and 31 at bats, no home runs, and 2 RBIs. He's only driven in runs in 1 of those 7 games. The whole point of this is it's still going to be a work in progress for the offense, even when Marte comes back, probably against the Cardinals when that road trip begins.
Yeah, it is. And the other guy out there too that was a big part of the Reds offense last year was Christian Encarnacion Strand, who this team's been without. The offense seems to go better when TJ Friedel's in the lineup for whatever reason. I mean, you can go through a million reasons. I am a huge TJ Friedel fan. I think there are a lot of reasons why the offense is better when he's in there. So hopefully this latest injury is nothing major and that he's going to be back too. I just think you have to have guys in the lineup that take pressure off of everybody else. And I think there's something about TJ that does that. I know he's got a little power, but there's just something about him being in the lineup that I think lets everybody else relax. I think everybody just kind of falls into place when he's in there, in particular at the top of the order. But I don't know what it is. It's just one of those things. I don't know that you can necessarily put your finger on it. Back to your point about Marte, I've kind of made it a habit not to put a lot of stock in minor league numbers when a guy's going through a rehab. I think it's a little bit different with Marte because this team needs him to come back and be productive, especially if and I can't imagine that he'll be taking at bats from Candelario, especially as hot as Jamer is right now. And again, that's another thing where I expect him to be back on Friday in the first game of the Red Sox series. But with him swinging the bat, I can't imagine he'll take at bats from there. But Jonathan India has been better here lately. He's cooled off some. But if he's going to come back and take at bats from somebody that's hitting, now when you're only scoring 2 runs and 3 runs in a series, that kind of looks like nobody's hitting. But you got to make sure that you can contribute. So that's where I think the numbers in AAA, like I said, I try not to make a big deal out of them, but I think
I shouldn't either. Yeah. As you're saying that, I'm like, come on, Mike. That is like one of the oldest known commodities in baseball, and that is don't put too much stock into minor league numbers, especially on rehab. But you do want to see something from him in the minor leagues.
Yeah, you do. And that's why I think this one's a little bit different. So all of that is to say, maybe this is a different situation. Maybe you do want to see him have some success. They keep saying that the thing they want to see with him is he in good shape? Is he in game shape? Is he ready to go? Is he, fully ready and ready to play every day? I think that's what they want to see. But I think there is a part where you're like, I'd also like to know that his timing's there. So we'll see. I mean, he's still got another week, and I just can't imagine that if they don't feel like he's ready, and ready can look different to a different eye. But if he's not ready, I don't know that he would necessarily come back. But we'll see. I know they miss his bat right now. It would be nice to have him back. I don't know that he has to necessarily hit for a lot of power, but it would be nice to have a guy back in the middle of the lineup that can drive the ball, drive guys in. And I think that's what they want to see from him anyway. Shoot the gaps, be a gap-to-gap guy, and move some base runners.
And he's a right-handed bat, Tommy. How much have we heard in the first half of this season? The lack of production from right-handed bats for the Reds. I mean, it's led some people to even surmise that maybe Nick Krall needs to go out and make a deal for a right-handed bat. Perhaps, though, with CES and Noelvi Marte projected to come back certainly by mid-July, maybe that resolves that issue of right-handed power.
Yeah, you'd like to think so. And the other part of it, too, is it is going to be, even if you went out and got somebody, it's still going to be a temporary move because at some point you're going to have Matt McLain back, too. So that's 3 right-handed bats right there that you'll get back into your lineup at some point. So do you want to go out, make a big move? I know you always want to win right now, but you also still have to keep the future in mind because these are the guys that are part of your core. So you kind of have to keep all that in mind too when you go out and make these deals. That's where I'm glad I'm not a general manager because sometimes you have to look at the now and figure it out down the road. But we'll see. We'll see how they play it. I understand the thought and the thinking there, but I think you have a better feel for where you're at once you get these guys back, especially Marte. I think he's going to be a big piece, and then we'll see where and when Encarnacion Strand fits in.
Any update on him? I mean, it seems to be pretty quiet with him, and nobody's talking that much about his health.
No, I think there was an update that he's going to get checked up, another checkup again, probably in a few days. Might be actually in the next couple of days. And then I think once they figure that out, they'll have a better idea of what the next course of action is going to be for him. The last we heard, it sounded like they were still trying to avoid surgery with him. And if he can do that, then he'll be back in much, much sooner. I mean, the surgery could be a much different recovery time period. So it sounds like they're going to be able to avoid surgery. That's the hope. If that's the case, I think the plan is probably around the All-Star break, but no real updates on that yet.
And I know you mentioned this a couple of minutes ago, but TJ Friedel and Jamer both, well, Jamer back for the Red Sox series, but TJ more of a day-to-day situation.
Yeah, the hope there is that he can avoid the IL. Now, if he can be back sometime over the weekend, basically anytime before Sunday, I think they'll avoid the IL with him. But if it looks like he's going to miss much more time than that, then he'll have to go on the IL. But hopefully that this will heal. It seemed like he was reacting and moving around pretty good. So I think they're very optimistic that he'll avoid the IL.
You talk to David Bell before every game, and I keep coming back to this. If there is one personality who I think is perfectly suited to handle what he has had to handle, what the Reds of 2024 have had to go through, it's David Bell. And I maintain that. And fans, look, the manager position is a lightning rod. You and me both know that. David Bell knows that as well as anybody. But he seems to maintain a very calm demeanor, win or lose.
If you want to know how important that is, talk to players. Because if you talk to a player, say, what is the most important thing when you're going through a tough time? A lot of times they will say, I want a manager that's going to stay level-headed. I want a guy that's not going to freak out and continue to have faith in us when things aren't going well. That is David right there. You talk to players, they really respect his demeanor. He seems like he's got the full respect of those guys, which I think is really important. I mean, we can sit here and fans can say what they want because it's kind of a helicopter view. You're not really down there in the trenches going through what they're going through with them together. And so there's really no way of knowing what that dynamic is truly like. So, yeah, I talk to David every day, and I talk to the players pretty consistently, and they'll tell you that he, like you were saying, he's kind of the perfect temperament when you're going through a tough time. He will make adjustments when he needs to. We've seen him tweak the lineup a little bit earlier in the year to get guys going. He dropped Jonathan India way down in the lineup. That seemed to get him going. So we've seen him make the adjustments that he needs to make at times, but he's not going to overreact. And that's, I think, all you can ask for. Teams are going to go through the ebbs and flows. He knows that. He's been through it. He played a long time, and he wasn't a particularly great hitter, so he knows what it's like to struggle offensively. So he can kind of help guys through the ups and downs. And when you have a young team, I think those peaks and valleys are going to be a little higher and a little lower just because, you're still trying to figure out how to level those things off. So he does seem to have a really good temperament for all this.
One thing I've wanted to ask him, and I think this just popped into my mind. He was on the winningest team in Major League Baseball regular season history. The 2001 Mariners won 116 games, lost to the Yankees in 5 games in the ALCS. But I wonder in his mind if he ever goes back to that season when everything was going right for Seattle and Lou Piniella. Everything. Every button Lou pushed went right. And I wonder if he ever goes back to that and goes, God, I just like a 3-week, 4-week taste of that right now. And if you do, probably that's good enough to get this team into wild card position and get them to the playoffs, which leads me to this question, Tommy. Why should Reds fans think that these 2024 Reds can be like the 22 Phillies or the 23 Diamondbacks.
There's no reason they can't be. I mean, that's the thing that you kind of have to keep in mind through all of this. Look, the Diamondback, I want to say it was I think it was a 9-game losing streak the Diamondbacks had in August of last year. Keep that in mind.
I forgot that. That is true. Yes.
This is a team that went on to the World Series. They were the National League champions, and they lost 9 and it's not like they were good when they lost 9 in a row. They were kind of treading water at that point anyway. They end up losing 9 in a row. They sneak into the postseason, largely due to the fact that the Reds kind of cooled off at the end. Otherwise, it was the Reds' spot to lose. So the Diamondbacks snuck in. They got hot. They had some good pitching. They had some good young players. There are a lot of similarities to that team and this Reds team. To be frank, I still think the Reds are better than that group. I thought they were better last year, but obviously the Diamondbacks.
So you think if this Reds team plays to their potential and nothing more, just plays to their potential, let's say they get all 3 pieces back and they're relatively productive, Marte, CES, and McLean. I think maybe I would buy that argument that probably offensively more talented, deeper roster.
But that's the key. I mean, that the guys have to come back and perform to what they're capable of. For second-year players, is that truly a reasonable expectation? It's, hey, look, this is the big leagues. It's fair because they're in the big leagues.
Right.
But being realistic, that would be incredible if they come back and they are truly at where they are capable of being. It's possible, sure, but it goes back to what we started out talking about, and that was the pitching, because the pitching can carry you even if those guys aren't quite up to 100% of what they're capable of. So, yeah, I mean, I just think the pitching is going to keep them in games. The pitching kept them in games when they were struggling throughout the entire month of May. And to your point, they have been through that 2-week stretch. They had that stretch where they won 14 of 19 games and got them right back into the playoff race. The Reds are right in the thick of the playoff race now, and they're a few games under 500 because of how tight the National League wild card is. All it takes is for one team to get hot that's right there in the mix of the wild card, and then once you get to the postseason, who knows what could happen. But teams that have good top-end rotations, nobody wants to play teams like that in the playoffs. I wouldn't want to play the Pirates in a postseason series. Because
we saw that over the last 3 games.
No question. The top guys in their rotation are really, really good. And they've got some veteran. I mean, Brian Reynolds is a really good player. Andrew McCutchen can still come up with some really big hits. He's still playing at a high level. That's a team that I don't think teams would want to face in a postseason series. I don't think teams would want to play the Reds in a postseason series. So, long story short, yes, I think the Reds. It could be fun if they can get all their pieces back and get the contributions that they're hoping to get.
What impressed you the most about Skeens?
I think it was the fact that he knew how to pitch, and he's kind of already where Hunter Greene is now. He's got that split finger sinker, like splinker, whatever you want to call it. That thing, he had the fastball in the first inning. It gets smoked by Spencer Steer, and he's like, all right, we're done with the fastball for now. I'm going to use that as a put-away pitch. And he completely changed pretty much instantly how he was attacking Reds hitters, and he did so by locating every pitch that he threw. And once he went away from using the fastball early and just using it late, the guy throws, 102?
Yeah.
And he operated at about 95 and was just fine. And then all of a sudden, boom, there it is when you need it. He located, he pitched. That's what stood out to me. That dude is really, really good.
All right. I want to finish up. First of all, thank you, Tommy, for taking time on your day off. I want to do that before we get to the end of the podcast. And
no problem.
I know days off in Major League Baseball are like gold, so thank you.
Well, it's cloudy out right now, so this just gives us a time to let the clouds burn off and go enjoy the sunshine, hopefully a little bit later.
It's like not the June doom. What is it in California when they say that let the morning layer burn off? That's what.
Oh, the marine layer, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the marine layer. Yes, yep. Thank you. I want to finish up on a kind of a serious note and also a sentimental note. Willie Mays, the greatest living baseball player, passed away on Tuesday at the age of 93. And it's almost ironic, appropriate that he passes just a couple of days before the Rick Wood Field games down in Birmingham, Alabama, or the game in Birmingham, Alabama. And I heard Jim Day and I think Brian Giesenslaw bring this up on the Bally Sports broadcast. I don't know if you did as well. That Dusty Baker spoke with Willie Mays, I think last weekend, and he is going to speak this coming weekend at those games. What do you think of his passing, and what leaves the biggest mark on you as someone who's always loved the game of baseball?
It hit me hard. I mean, I think we were, we were. I remember walking over the bridge and looked at my phone and I went, wow, Willie Mays just passed. And he's 93 years old. Great run. Love to live to 93. But the thing about what I thought it was neat in a way to go back. Obviously, I never watched him play. He is definitely on the short list of guys that I would love to go back and watch play. Him, Mickey Mantle, and Babe Ruth. I would love to get a chance to watch those three guys play baseball. But reading and listening to everything about him, it wasn't just him as a player. It was the fact that he was a very kind-hearted person. Somebody said, I think they said peacemaker, just wanted everybody to get along. Just was just a genuinely good human being. And on top of that, one of the greatest baseball players that ever lived. But it was who he was as a person, the charisma, everything that I think we need in this game. And I think this game is missing so desperately right now. I couldn't help but think, man, if he played in this era, just think of his popularity when he played. Just think if he played right now, he might be bigger than Michael Jordan because of just the sheer volume of everything that we have, the media, the social media. I mean, everything. It would be really, really incredible. But I think that's what stands out to me is just who he was while still being one of the greatest players that ever lived. And you could argue the greatest player that ever lived. So that's pretty incredible. I loving this game as much as I do, it almost breaks my heart in a way to not have been able to see him play. Right. Just because of how good he was and who he was as a person. But he's one of those guys. We need more people like him in this world. That's for sure.
So there's one word that comes to mind, Tommy, when I see Willie Mays, and I saw him play, believe it or not, but I was way too young. I mean, I think I was like 6 years old when in his final days with the New York Mets. Joy. And I saw a news clip of him speaking at a press conference as he was retiring just a couple of days ago. I saw the news clip. And what's very apparent is how much baseball meant to him and how he played the game with such joy. Mm-hmm. And it's not coincidental to me, Tommy, that two of the greatest players, their monikers have the word kid in them. Of course, Willie Mays is the Say Hey Kid, and the kid we knew, especially growing up in Cincinnati, Ken Griffey Jr. And it's very ironic that Ken Griffey Jr. was always measured to the Willie Mays standard. Yeah. And that's kind of how I bring today's generation. Well, it's almost a generation ago that we're talking about Ken Griffey Jr. Right. to the, the long after year of the era of Willie Mays. And when I was also growing up, more in my teens, Eric Davis was coming up. And the gold standard was always, is this guy, meaning Eric Davis, Eric the Red, going to be the next Willie Mays? And I will tell you, having grown up with the Big Red Machine, having watched that club, the greatest player I ever remember seeing in person was Eric Davis. And I think Eric Davis had most of the skills that Willie Mays had. Unfortunately, injury slowed down Eric the Red. But to me, Eric Davis is the closest thing I ever saw to Willie Mays.
Yeah, I think when you, for me, Ken Griffey Jr., the last few days have got me thinking more about Ken Griffey because I'm like, well, like I was saying, I wish I could have watched him play, but I think people will say the same thing about Ken Griffey Jr., that he's one of those players that's just so transcendent. Griffey was the Jordan of baseball during his time, which was very cool. And Jeter, maybe, but I still don't think Jeter had that same charisma that Ken Griffey Jr. had. I just don't think we've had that.
He did in a much more subtle, nuanced way. And that was intentional. Derek never wanted to have other people controlling him the way mass marketing can control you. And I think that was on purpose with Derek. I interrupted you, but go ahead.
No, but I think that's so good to have. Who do we have right now in the game like that? Who have we had since Ken Griffey Jr.?
Shohei, but he is so managed and controlled that you don't see. And there's the language barrier. Let's be very frank about that. You don't see all of his personality on full display. Maybe you will in a year or two or three. But right now, there isn't that charisma that certainly was on display with, Willie Mays or Ken Griffey Jr.
Well, I hate to put this on him, but that's one of the things that I think we have here, the chance to see Ellie possibly become that. If he ever reaches his full potential, he's got a chance. And I think that's why people are kind of hard on him, is because the expectations are so high for Ellie. And I get why, because you can see that it's in there. Every once in a while, he taps into it and he can't be stopped. And he is the greatest player in baseball for a week stretch, or maybe it's a 2-week stretch. And you kind of hope, it goes back to what I was saying earlier, you kind of hope he can take out those peaks and valleys. And then he's got a chance to be that, because he's got the charisma. He's got just unbelievable skills, and he's got a little bit of flair to him, but he's still humble at the same time.
He is.
And he's got a chance to kind of be that next guy. But you still got to be a consistent player day in and day out. He's still very young, and but it would be kind of fun to see him become that, because you go anywhere in this country, any major league city, and people talk about him. He gets an applause in every city that we go to. It's really, really cool to see how much he captivates the Major League Baseball fan base.
Yeah, and when he scores on a missed botched pickoff at second base, and you see him round third and score, and what were you thinking when you watched that play in person? You ever seen anything like that?
No, but the thing is, you're so conditioned to expect the unexpected with him. So you see the throw get away, you're watching for it the whole time, because he's gonna bust it to third. He did. You kind of see the way the center fielder's coming in a little nonchalant, and then you see J.R. House wave him home, and you're like, all right, here we go. And he goes sliding across home plate, and you're like, yeah, he's in there. Yeah, he did it. That's him, just being him. It's crazy. It's just unbelievable, the things that he can do on the baseball field. I've expected him to steal home on other occasions, and I think it'll happen again.
Do you think David Bell and the Reds are putting the brakes on him just a little bit to try and conserve him and not have him go full bore? Because there have been a couple of instances on this past road trip where this team is struggling for offense. And I'm like, as soon as he gets on first base, I'm expecting him on second. And that hasn't always been the case.
No, it's not that they're putting the brakes on him. I think other teams are. I think other teams are figuring out ways to mitigate the Reds' running game. And to Colin Cowgill, I talked to David about it quite a bit, but teams have completely changed how pitchers have completely changed their deliveries with runners on base. They're seeing way more slide steps than what's on video.
Right.
Pitchers are doing things against the Reds that they don't do against any other team to try to limit the running game. And because of that, you're starting from scratch. So even as fast as Ellie is, he still wants to make sure that he's got guys timed up. He knows how quick a pitcher is going to be to the plate. He wants to make sure he knows all this stuff before he runs because it's all calculated. So I think that's what you're seeing more than anything. I don't think it's the Reds putting the brakes on him. In fact, I think the Reds are going to try to do things to get him more involved. So the ball goes to right field yesterday. It's the double, and the Pirates hold the runner at third. Ellie was going out to be a cutoff man on that play, so the Reds can get his arm involved in that play to possibly cut down a runner at the plate. I think you're going to see things like that.
All right. He is Tommy Thrall. He is always a pleasure to catch up with. And I, again, appreciate your time on a day off. He is the play-by-play voice of the Cincinnati Reds, and someone you can ask anything about Cedar Rapids, Iowa, and he will come up with the correct answer. He'll never disappoint, and he certainly didn't disappoint on this podcast. Tommy, I want to thank you for joining me.
Absolutely, Trags. Anytime. Thanks so much.
All right. He's Tommy Thrall. I'm Mike Petralia. Thanks for downloading this episode of Code Reds on the CLNS Media Network.